What's good, YouTube? Beaty Money, aka Gandalf the Lit, back here for yet another video, and today I'm giving you guys 5 recording tips for DIY rappers. And this is for y'all that are out there that you know, maybe you're just getting into recording yourself as a rapper, and you know, you don't have a team, you're trying to come up, you're trying to build, and you know, in the beginning, you know, it's hard because you don't be a learning curve, right, when it comes to recording. And oftentimes, a lot of these guys that are successful rappers now are guys who produce themselves a lot. You know, if we look at guys like Mac Miller, J. Cole, Black, you know, these guys all record themselves and figure some stuff out themselves. And that's not to say that, you know, it can't be a goal of yours to get, you know, to a certain point where either you get signed or you attract a team around you and you build your own label or whatever, you know. But I think it never hurts to have knowledge, and it never hurts to get great at your craft. And if your craft is rhyming, is rapping, flowing over beats, then it doesn't hurt to figure out what sounds good to you and how to make that a reality within a beat. So without further ado, let's get to these tips. Tip number 1, the goal when you're first trying to record yourself is to get as clean vocals as you can, you know. So if you're recording into whatever DAW you're using, whether it's FL Studio or whether it's Ableton or Logic or Pro Tools, you want to have a sound on your vocals that is as clean as possible. And by clean, I mean, you know, no reverberant sound. You don't want to sound like you're in a concert hall out the gate when you're recording your vocals. You want to be as done as possible. And so some tips for that are, you know, like you can go into a closet and put up a bunch of clothes or sheets, or if you have egg crates, see I have egg crates up here in my studio, you put that up into a closet and, you know, put a microphone in there and go into that room, and it'll be deader than if you're just inside of an open room with hardwood floors, let's say. Carpeting helps, you know. So a good way to test this is to snap into your microphone and listen back to it. If you hear if it's really wet sounding, and meaning that you hear that reverb inside of there, then you probably want to do something to try to help it be deader, because you want to add all those things like reverb and delays like later on in the process. You don't want it, because it's easier to add it than it is to take it away, and you don't want to be in a position where you don't like it and you're going to try to fix it. Okay, so tip number 1 is all about getting clean vocals. Another aspect of getting clean vocals is microphone placement. The thing about microphones is everyone is a little bit different. There's different types of microphones, and I'm going to put a link inside of the description of different microphones that I feel are affordable for you kind of younger or newer rappers. It doesn't have to be younger. Newer rappers who are just trying to get your music out there and trying to figure out a way to record yourself. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. These are just ones that I feel are good. Some of them I haven't used myself, but some of them have been recommended to me. Every microphone isn't exactly the same, meaning like the distance that you have to be from the microphone to get clean vocals isn't always the same. You know, when you're recording yourself on a studio microphone, while you can still use the microphones that you see at concerts or use at live shows to record, you don't want to hold the microphone to your mouth, because another thing, just like the reverb issue, if you're too close to a microphone, you're gonna get a lot of low-end sound on your voice, you know, which is fine, but again, low-end sound is something that you want to EQ, and I'll talk a little bit more about EQing later on in my tips. But you know, again, you want to be able to add low-end more so than have to be in a position to try to clean up a muddy low-end. You know what I mean? So if you're too close to the microphone, it could clash, because you have to understand you are recording over trap beats, over hip-hop beats, which are very low and heavy. You know what I mean? We're trying to make beats that shake your car. You know what I mean? We're trying to make beats that make the walls rattle with our 808s and our kick drums and our basses, you know what I mean? So it's gonna be very low and heavy anyways, all right? So you want to try to get as clean of a sound as you can. And another thing about buying microphones is, some people might disagree with me, but I believe that I would rather take $800 and buy a really great preamp like an Apollo Twin or something and have a $100 microphone, because I think with a really good preamp you'll get a better quality sound with a decent setup, and you know, maybe spend $100, $150 on a microphone and $800 on a preamp, you know, as opposed to buying a $3,000 microphone. You know, I just don't think that in the beginning, that especially for your home studio, I think you can get a bunch of beautiful vocals without spending $5,000 on your rig. You know what I mean? So again, I'm gonna put some links to those microphones and some links to some preamps into the description below. Tip number 2, phrasing. Okay, this is one of the things that I see on SoundCloud when people are posting links is when us producers make a beat, we generally are thinking, or any producer worth his salt should be thinking about phrasing when we're laying out a track, right? So it should be something like it's gonna look something like this. Intro, like 16, 24, 32 bar. Verse, right? Because 16, 24, 32, it really depends on the tempo, but for the most part, that's how long a verse will be. Maybe 8 or 16 bar hook, verse, hook, verse, and maybe sometimes I'll put like a development section, and other guys might put like a middle section in there to break it up a little bit. But when you're going to rhyme over a beat, I would highly recommend really spend some time with that beat, especially if you spend money on leasing or something. Spend some time with that beat, listen to it, and try to figure out what the phrases are. And maybe you don't necessarily have to get even as technical as, let's say, counting the bars, even though that doesn't hurt. You just know, like, all right, at the 15-second mark is when the beat drops. At the 45-second mark is where the first hook is. At the minute 15 mark is where this next chorus ends, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, take some time to figure out the phrasing. Don't just rhyme straight through a track, because most producers, we're trying to give you guys space for a hook and space for, being able to break it up a little bit, so that way you're not continuously flowing over the entire beat. I mean, there is beats that are made that are like more for freestyling, like if you listen to like Sway or whatever, and they're just like rhyming continuously over a beat. Like that's one thing, but I know for myself and the producers that are putting up beats to be used as songs, we're trying to break it up a little bit to give you guys some space to have hooks or choruses or and break it up a little bit. Tip number 3. All right, tip number 3 is about trying to find songs that fit your voice, right? Ideally, it would be good as a vocalist, any vocalist, whether you're rapping or singing, to know what keys suit you the best, right? Because us humans, we tend to speak on one pitch, right? Human vocal range isn't super huge unless you're like a freak of nature like Freddie Mercury or somebody. A lot of us are lucky to get an octave or 2 octaves, right? Not 4. So it really behooves you to kind of figure out like where your voice feels good, and when you go to pick a beat, trying to find a beat where your voice fits in there. And also knowing what key you're rhyming in and stuff like that is because I don't see any shame in auto-tuning, honestly. And just because you use auto-tune doesn't mean that you're gonna sound like T-Pain, right? A lot of people use auto-tune. Kanye West, I've heard it on some Kendrick Lamar stuff, and auto-tune can be very subtle depending on the plugin, but most plugins have like a percentage of like how strong you want to make the auto-tune. And I know some of you might not, some of you guys might be recording straight into GarageBand, which is fine. I mean, you might not have the VST plugin to do the auto-tuning, but auto-tune is a great tool to help you kind of fit in that pocket when you're trying to rhyme. But even without auto-tune, if you know what keys, or you're looking for a key where like you're flowing over the top of that beat and you're like, yeah, this fits my voice, it's just going to sound better. Because if you listen to any of these guys that are like at the top of the game and they're rhyming, they're not just like flowing continuously monotone on one pitch. They're like going up and down. Like Eminem is classic about that. Eminem really fits in beats very well. I mean, obviously he's like one of the greatest ever. J. Cole's similar. Kendrick Lamar is similar too. So figure out when you go to get a beat, you don't necessarily have to know the key that it's in, but definitely be cognizant of, okay, this beat, I like this beat, but it feels like I'm straining too much, because in order for my voice to fit in this beat, I have to make my voice too high, or maybe I have to make my voice too low to fit into this beat. You want to find one that your voice sits like right in the pocket of the tonal center. So that's my tip number 3, is trying to figure out beats that fit your voice. Tip number 4. This tip is one that I really see a lot again online, and I understand that a lot of you guys that are up and coming or just get into it, you're just rhyming into your phone and putting that over a beat. Now the thing is even if you have a GarageBand, you're gonna have an option for multiple audio tracks, and if you go to download a beat off a line, whether you lease it or buy it or you steal it, whatever you guys are doing, that's going to only take up one audio channel. And the beauty of these DAWs today is that we can put as many audio channels on a particular project as our computer can handle, right? You know, you could probably easily stack 10 vocal tracks on top of each other. You know, Stevie Wonder was famous for this. You know, sometimes he would stack like tons of tracks, and he was using tape. It wasn't like that was expensive back in the day. So stacking your vocals is part of the tradition of hip hop. If you go back to the 90s and listen to Biggie, Tupac, Eminem, even Public Enemy, you know, these guys were like accentuating certain parts of their rhymes to stacking their vocals on top of it. You know what I mean? Like, and like if you listen to Eminem, sometimes he'll be like flowing in his like normal voice. You know, I mean, in his like normal flow, and he might come in and be a little bit more emotive or more aggressive inside of the part that's like accentuating his rhymes, right? And you hear it today still. Like if you go listen to J. Cole, sometimes what J. Cole will do is he might not stack his vocals on his verse, but when the hook comes, he'll start stacking vocals, because that also, like, since J. Cole doesn't sing necessarily, it signals to the listener that this is a different section. So that's one thing to do. And another thing that I see that's very popular today inside of like trap music, for example, if you listen to like Migos or any of these or any of the members of Migos in their own solo projects, you'll listen to like this kind of like this call and response. Will they have kind of like their main voice, and then they'll like at the end of the phrase they'll like jump, might have like a sound or a word or a couple words that accentuate the phrase that was just said, you know. And so my thing with you guys that are like learning this stuff yourself, and you're trying to get your sound together yourself, and you're trying to figure it out, you know, experiment. You know, there is no rules to this, but you know, I would caution against just like one single voice going straight through the track. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that you can do ad-libbing wise, like even if you're not necessarily like stacking your vocals, you know, you could add like sounds, or like if you say for example, if you say like car, or like Maserati, or like Bugatti inside of your rhyme, put the sound of a car behind it or something, you know. I'm just kind of like, oh, that's what, you know, it catch that listener's ear, you know, that, oh, this is he said this, you know what I mean? There's so many things that you can do. It's just a matter of how creative can you be. Another thing that you see too is with these guys that kind of like, for lack of a better term, sing rap, like let's say Post Malone. Post Malone stacks a lot of his vocals, you know what I mean? He stacks a whole bunch of his vocals, and he puts a lot of harmonies on top of it, and it sounds great. If you can sing, go for that, you know. Try to stack and experiment with different voices, even if you don't really know exactly how to stack chords or arrange for a voice, you know, just use your ear. If you're good at singing, you probably have a decent ear anyways. Just experiment with stacking different tones and stuff like that. If your vocals are clean to initially start, it'll be a lot easier to experiment with this stuff too. Like adding delays and reverbs and stuff adds a whole lot to, let's say you're not going to stack your vocals in a verse, but experimenting with different reverbs and delays also adds like a different like spice to it, you know what I mean? And sometimes there is tracks that do work with just like a straight clean vocal, not much reverb, not much delay. But I definitely would encourage y'all to experiment with stacking vocals. It's kind of part of the tradition of hip hop. P. Diddy did it a lot in the 90s. All those guys did it. So I would definitely go back and listen like to what your favorite rappers do. If during their verses, listen to what they're doing. Are they stacking their vocals? Are they doing a call and response? How are they accentuating their phrases? Is there nothing on their vocals, you know? So, but definitely look into stacking your vocals. If you are using any DAW, you should be able to have at least 2 or 3 audio channels that you can experiment with this, you know? And another thing about stacking real quick is I would encourage you to, this is a little technical, but when you're EQing your vocals, like, I feel like when your main vocal should have some low end on it. Like don't make the low end too heavy, because it's going to clash again with these like beats. It's going to clash with the 808s and the low end of the beat. But you know, add some mids and low end to that vocal. And for the background vocals, I would pull up on the low end. I would kind of cut off the low end and the mids a little bit, so that those background vocals don't get in the way too much of the main vocals. So because if you leave that body on the main vocal, you're going to give it a chance to kind of really push through the mix, you know what I mean? So That was just a little, in my opinion, that's just like a little EQE mixing tip to kind of help, you know, with the stacking process. So that's tip number 4, stack your vocals. Tip number 5 comes down to flow, right? So here's the thing about rhyming and recording yourself. You know, you have to be confident when you do this, right? Just like I'm speaking on this camera, right? I don't usually, the way that I'm talking to you guys on this way isn't the way that I generally sit around talking, because in order for me to convey a message, I have to be a little bit over the top, right, when I'm speaking. The same thing when you're rhyming. You're gonna have to be a little bit over the top. You know, experiment with like when you think that you're at 100 and you're emoting, give it another 10%, you know what I mean? Because the beauty about being in a studio is that you're in the privacy of your own studio, you're by yourself. You'd be surprised, like there could be somebody I see that looks really shy, but when they get into the studio, they're just a beast, you know what I mean? Like they just like open up the floodgates and they just let it out, you know? And I think that's what made Eminem so successful when Eminem first came out, was that Eminem was so like emotive and he was so animated when he rhymed, you know? And Kendrick Lamar has the same thing going for him, you know what I mean? Like if you listen to Kendrick, like sometimes he's like yelling to the mic. J. Cole's the same way. But then again, there's also like some guys like Black that are a little bit more laid back when they rhyme, but they're still very emotive. You know, just because you're laid back doesn't mean that you're not trying to speak with a little bit more pronounced like diction and enunciation, because again, you want to be able to have people understand what you're saying. For the most part, I mean, again, there's some people that have the vibes when they rhyme that are kind of difficult to understand, but that's part of their vibe. And again, you know, these tips, they're just tips, you know what I mean? And it really comes down to y'all recording yourself, getting to know yourself, getting to know what you're like, because you know, this whole thing it's a process of getting better, and the only way that you're going to get better at rhyming, it's the same way that we get better at producing, is by recording yourself and listening to yourself. You know, you can put out a track online, and there could be 10 different people that give you 10 different answers, but the reality is only you as an artist know what you want to sound like, and you should always be focused on that goal. You know what I mean? Focus on chasing that sound in your head, and really the only way that you're going to get to that sound is by recording yourself over and over and over again. Listen to it. You know, there's nothing wrong with recording a song, listening to it for a week, and then saying, I'm gonna go back and re-record this because I learned this and this and this and this about my vocals, and I think I can do this X, Y, and Z better. Now, the other flip side of that is sometimes you can have paralysis by analysis, and you can never put something out because you're always chasing that perfection. Really, nothing in life is perfect. So you have to walk that line of like getting it to a point where you're proud of it and you're happy with it. But the goal should be that you release something in 1 year, another year you release another thing, and that year later you should look back on your first thing and say, you know what, this is way better than that, because you should be working on your craft and listening to it, getting better and better. So hope these tips are helpful for y'all. Those are kind of things that I'm looking for or listening to when I'm listening to rappers that are kind of coming up online. When I hear kind of like younger guys or guys that are newer to rapping, kind of things that I think could help y'all put out the best you possible. So hope these help. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. I'm going to be putting up more of these tips and tutorials over time. I got some more vlogs coming. I got some trombone stuff coming. And of course, 4 beats a week, as always. So thank you guys so much for listening to me. Thank you so much for watching this whole video. I'm sure it's a little bit long. And if you want me to talk about something or give some tips or whatever, please comment below, and I will definitely try to get that done. So hope everybody's doing great. I will talk to you guys later. Deuces.